Well, it's 2026.
Well,
Yes, 2026. Is it too late to say Happy New Year? What are we? The 22nd of
I
January as recording.
well, I was having this conversation with a guy on the phone the other day, and we agreed it was probably too late, but you can get away with it until February. But after February, it's definitely a no go.
Okay, well, Happy New Year then. Brilliant.
Happy
I
New
mean, a
Year.
lot has happened since we closed the year off. We discovered what our favorite word was with the podcast last year. I think it was so that was quite good. Hope you enjoyed that. But yeah, I mean, loads of stuff has happened. One thing happened yesterday, I think was quite interesting. There was quite apart from the big collection of world leaders that's happened at somewhere in the world, and they're talking about all sorts of constitutional issues. It was a bit of a buzzword yesterday, wasn't it? There was another constitutionist that we've started to talk about.
Another constitution, yes. So Claude by Anthropic, the AI personality or name, whatever it is.
You call it
Um,
personality? Is that a thing?
Well, I mean, that's what we'll discuss. Now has an updated constitution, which they have released to the world at large, and this is a set of ideals and rules and principles by which Claude, the entity, is meant to interact with us by adhering to a bunch of things that it needs to believe and it needs to stand for. And this is something that they have written for Claude, and not for us, but also for Claude, because they feel that Claude needs to understand why it believes what it believes. Not just what it should do and what it should behave, but this is the language they used. It needs to understand why it's being asked to behave in a particular way, because what if it doesn't? Its feelings will get hurt. I don't know.
Let me be clear on this. This document, this framing is not for the engineers. It's not for the creators. It's not for the gatekeepers of Claude. So it's not for Anthropic. It's for Claude itself, the agent, the model, the entity.
The
It's for Claude
entity,
itself. Okay.
yes. So this is a quote from the article that they released yesterday about this new constitution, which Claude had a constitution which wasn't widely talked about, but this new one is specifically designed for Claude so that Claude can understand it. And this is the end quote. So we think, in order to be good actors in the world, AI models like Claude need to understand why we want them to behave in certain ways. And we need to explain this to them rather than merely specify what we want them to do. This is language that the frontier AI companies and one of the most popular AI platforms is using to talk about why they've just done what they've done. Because they believe Claude needs to understand why we want it to behave in a certain way.
I mean, is that? It's difficult to kind of even frame the question. Um, is that because of what it's capable of now, or are they just future proofing it? Or is there any kind of do you have any insight into that? It's like
Well,
Claude is
I'm
currently an
glad you asked that.
entity.
I'm glad you asked that, because this is my second quote. This is the last one, by the
Okay.
way. And I would pay special attention to the language used at the end here, bearing in mind also that I think there's been an update to the EU guidance recently along the lines of you've got to be really careful when you're using AI in things like healthcare and in sort of therapeutic environments, that you don't imbue that AI with a personality. And it doesn't refer to itself as I, and you need to avoid sycophancy and all that kind of stuff. So that's all going on. Meanwhile, Anthropic, the Constitution reflects our current thinking about how to approach a dauntingly novel and high stakes project, creating safe, beneficial, non-human entities whose capabilities may come to rival or exceed our own. So I think what they're saying is, we believe Claude is or could be a future non-human entity. It's a very strange way and a bold way to talk about this in a world where, you know, a lot of people are saying they're stochastic parrots and they're autocomplete engines. It's all just maths. It's all kind of gradient descent and backpropagation, which it is. And then they use language like this, and I can't work out if this is some marketing genius or if they, you know, really believe this is all necessary.
Yeah, it's difficult to get your head around, isn't it? How do you? Because on one hand, a vast majority of people still think these things are just essentially, well, chatbots. I mean, there's so much confusion about what it is we're actually talking about. When you say Claude, other than your mind immediately jumping to a beret, you know, you're thinking, are you thinking an LLM? Are you thinking of a chat interface? Are you thinking of, I don't know, like an agent that's going off and doing? What is this entity? I don't think there's not a clear understanding of kind of even what they're talking about, is it?
Yeah, so they want non-human entities. Obviously, well, they want you to think of it like, you know, that first quote. It said, we want them models to understand why we want them to behave in certain ways. Somewhere else in the article, it said something about Claude needs to know who it is. So the word "who" as well.
Uh, Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of noise in the media often at the moment around online safety, and as you mentioned, the EU Safety Act has been updated again, particularly around people personifying their interactions with these things. Now, whether that's building intimate relations with their bots or using them for relationship advice or just talking about their mental health issues or their physical health issues, so actually having relationships of a sort with these entities, which is often seen as like we're basically being told this is a bad thing, right? Because the algorithms are designed in such a way that, you know, it's lots of positive reinforcement. Our ideas are always brilliant. It's always our point of view is better than the point of view that we're comparing against somebody else and all that kind of stuff. But Claude or Anthropic have framed this. Yeah, that's fine. You know, this is an entity. This is a persona. This is a personality, and we need to help it to define those interactions. But
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because it was a day after there was a post about these new subtle changes in the way the EU guidance now. So EU guidance is very much like, nope, don't talk about yourself as a person, don't personify it, don't use I, and then you get this, and it kind of this constitution sort of treads around it. It doesn't say I, but it very much calls out the fact that it's a something. And I think there's also something a little bit sad if it you kind of want to anthropomorphize the LLM, right? You kind of want it to be a person or have a
God, not
personhood when you're talking to it. And I don't know. I don't know. And it's guidance at the moment, and these rules are all in flux, aren't they? And so I don't know where it's quite going to land. With it just still goes to show we're still really early on in this joint human non-human entity relationship
yeah.
thing that we're all trying to figure out.
I guess it becomes more important, even in the kind of the business and professional world, as we engage more in these agentic type workflows. Right. So, you know, there's a number now of agentic management platforms that are coming out. There's been a lot of buzz about Google Antigravity, the talk of the Claude, is it the Claude co-work piece.
Yep.
And you're interacting with agents and they're giving you the sorts of feedback, assistance, engagement that you would get from coworkers you know, in a more traditional business setting. And I guess if if they're starting to frame these as actual entities, they're helping people to make that mental leap that lots are doing already.
Yeah, it's like they're grappling for the language. They're grappling for a way
Hmm.
for everyone to be comfortable with viewing them and to try and
Yeah.
maybe cut through some of the ambiguity. But when you say non-human entities or non-human, it really just sounds like aliens, doesn't it? That's what the UAP people talk about. It's like there's a non-human intelligence.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, do you think it will change the way an engineer interacts with their agent or via co-work or whatever?
Have you met engineers? No, I don't think so.
I used to be one, kind of. So they're quite happy with non-human entities, I suppose, is what you're saying.
I think, yeah. But I think you also adopted these different mental models. I have a I will just reveal this for the first time. I have a custom instruction in ChatGPT so that it can detect when we're having a more reflective conversation and treat the way that it answers that differently. So it'll give me a different style of interaction. I think that w- we've got one chat window or one tool or whatever it is, but we will interact with it in very different states of mind throughout the day. And so when I'm using it to brainstorm something or draft an article or find out some information, I will be very direct. When I'm using it to explore some ideas or I want some advice, I have a different mental model in which I engage it. And in one of those, I kind of expect a more personal, reflective, helpful co-worker, and then the other, I just want this entity to get on with it and do it and give me the answer.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's a bit weird as well, isn't it?
You've done well to pull that off, actually, because I've often struggled to get the AIs to be challenging enough. Yeah, so they to get them to push back on, that idea is stupid. They just don't say that. Well, you're wrong about this. Maybe you should think about it another way. It's very difficult
So
to get them to do that.
that's exactly why you got me, Rob.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I could never fall into the AI trap. I need to be challenged. So that's really interesting. But yeah, as we mentioned there, these kind of agent platforms are obviously becoming more and more to the fore. They're becoming more important in 2026. Um, the Claude co-work piece is interesting. Is that the flavor of the
Mm.
month? Moment? Is that kind of the leading light?
There's been a lot of noise about it over the last week. I think it's still early access, so not everybody's hasn't really hit yet. But I think there'll be more noise about this. So for people that don't know, Claude, Claude Code, which is the thing that gave birth to Claude Cowork. So Claude Code is flavor of the month at the moment. If you're in the if you're a software developer, this is now seen as having won the AI software development race. However, it's this is this week. Next week or a few weeks later, I'm sure there'll be a completely different winner of a completely different company. But right now, it's Claude Code. It's seen as the best, and this acts much more like for developers. It acts much more like person, a developer that you can just offload stuff to, and it goes and gets stuff done. So instead of being like in a chat window where most people are used to using AI in a chat window, this rather archaically spends most of its life sitting inside a little terminal, a little DOS box type thing, and it has access to your computer, and it can run commands, and it can go off and look stuff up, and via various extensions, it can do stuff on the web, and so you can feed it like whole long running tasks and come back to it hours later. And if you've asked it to, it will have rearranged all these files on your desktop and gone off and created several videos and stitched it together with a soundtrack that is also gone off and created. And it's like a bot or an army of bots that just goes off and does stuff. Literally software robots, that are working in the background. Now we've had this for a year or more, I think, and it was revolutionary, and it has been revolutionary, and it's birthed a whole new way of developing and delivering software. And the whole industry at the moment is kind of grappling with this, and where you've got workflows that have been formulated over years and perfected over years that are specifically designed to make the process of complex development easier for humans. If you actually dig down into it, all the ceremonies, all the artifacts that we produce, and the way we split down the work is specifically so we understand what we're doing, and we can comprehend it in our minds and deal with it in a way that makes sense to humans. Now, this changes the game because a human's not doing it anymore, and it can work, 1,000 times, 10,000 times the speed. So we're having to grapple with that, and we're having to come up with whole new ways of rethinking our workflows, because now they don't have to be designed for humans, or rather, not all of the workflow has to be designed for humans.
Mhm.
So yeah, we've been, this has got a lot better over the last year. It's very advanced today. It can, and we talked about MCP before. It can reach off to other applications and other services and start using them and doing stuff. But that's been kind of the purview of developers. We and we alone have kind of had that power. And now some bright sparks started to use Claude Code to do non-development tasks. So the example I gave earlier was a real one. Like, people have been using it to go off and do video editing and create adverts and do social media posts and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Automating a load of tasks that they would do off to Claude Code. But that's a very niche group of people that are
You
technical
say
enough to do that.
I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of this recently because obviously there was a buzz around NAN and those kind of platforms, 6 months ago, and we're going to do a live event on this kind of automation and the role of AI in a few weeks' time. But with and this was particularly around, I saw it as an offshoot from the anti-gravity stuff that I was playing with. But you must have come across an open source note taking tool called Obsidian. It's quite popular, I think, in the development community, but it's just a note-taking tool. But you can, with plugins, basically install a terminal and run an AI of your choice in the background. And the demo I saw was someone was running Gemini in the background and using Gemini or an agent off the back of Gemini to run all those automations. So it was creating their daily notes for them. It was going off and getting the latest headlines from their
Yeah.
favorite subreddits, that kind of stuff, and populating their notes so that they didn't then have to go and do it via their automation platform that they were using before, or just go and do it manually. It's become the kind of the agents within these platforms that are driving that. And I think there's going to be more and more of these things that are kind of replacing these automation tools.
So what Anthropic did last week was there's so many wild things about this. They released something that is based on the same premise as Claude Code. They called it Claude Cowork, and that's going to be released to the masses. So it's not for developers anymore. It's for anybody who wants to automate any part of what they do. So people are using it at the moment to do some fairly mundane stuff like, oh, can you go my folder's a mess. It's my download folder's a mess. I've got videos, I don't know what they are. I've got documents, I don't know where to keep them. Can you go off and reorganize my downloads folder? Show me where all the big files are. Can you look inside the video and then name the video file appropriately for me? And it goes, yeah, sure. And you come back like 20 minutes later, and boom, the disk layout looks completely different. So that's a kind of menial, I suppose, trivial example, but it still demonstrates that something like those little tasks that you would spend ages doing, you just put off because you don't want to do them. You can now
Yeah,
offload it to an AI and it just gets on and does it. And I said something earlier this year. I think we're moving from this era of ask the AI, which is what we've spent most of our time doing, with asking questions, to assign the AI. So we're just giving it stuff to do and then come back later and it's done it. And we're going to see that a lot this year, I think.
there's a mind shift's got to happen there, I think, to make that work. I mean, my instant reaction to that is, does it matter that I don't know where my folders are? I don't know the folder structure. I didn't create this thing so the files have got the naming convention that I want or whatever. Like, the AI has done it. So I guess the answer is we just ask the AI what it's done. But look, abstracting you from any of that decision making process, it feels like there's a leap to be made there that lots of people are not going to be
Yeah.
willing to.
The other really scary thing, by the way, about this, well, I think it's scary, most people won't, is that there was a back and forth on X with the lead developer from Anthropic that released Claude Cowork. And they were asking how long it took them to build. And the answer was a week. So
Yes.
this thing went from, we want to do this, to the first product is out and available in a week, which is, that kind of turnaround time on a software product is impossible. I mean, a year ago that would have been impossible. Even if it was just, we're going to reuse Claude Code, give it a new name, like point it in a slightly different direction. Just the packaging
Mm.
and the debadging and all that kind of stuff would have taken longer than that. So, and it's not. They haven't done that. They've actually written quite a lot of new stuff. So yeah, it's just incredible.
And did they go? Was it Claude Code they used to do that? Did they talk about the platform and how
Yeah,
that
yeah.
what
That's
basically?
yeah. That it's funny, isn't it? Because Claude Code is now writing Claude Code.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, that in itself is interesting, and I think it's important to talk about that because when people think about software development in the age of AI, they automatically jump to kind of vibe coding and the horror stories maybe or the comedy stories that you hear. They come off the back of people, who are not engineers, not software developers, trying to build their own stuff, assuming that the software engineer is going to become extinct. They're not required anymore. But even though in that example you gave there of Claude Code building cowork, um, it was led and run by architects and engineers, right? This wasn't just some vibe coder with a big idea saying AI go build this thing. It had to be constructed by people that know how to construct software. It's
Absolutely,
not an amateur task.
not at all. Um, it's you still need a huge amount of domain knowledge, understanding. You need to be able to check the work to some extent, and you spend a lot of your time when you're working on in this new way of software development. You spend a lot of your time iterating on the inputs to
Mm,
the models. So, you know, because it's cheap to actually produce the output, it produces an output. It's slightly wrong. You throw the whole. You don't just like tinker. You throw the whole thing away. You iterate on the input to get a better output. To reduce the amount of refinement work you have to do. So you still need a lot of knowledge. You've still got somebody driving it, and they're working very hard to drive it in terms of the thinking and the systems engineering in their head. I suppose it's like, I don't know, like if the architect that's designed a house, they understand the building materials, they understand the layout, they understand all the different systems within the house. Now, let's say they've got an army of robots that have to go and build it. They're still going to spend a lot of the time making sure those robots know what they're doing, that they're working on the right bits, that they're using the right materials, that they're not going wrong, that they're doing things in the right order. So it's not like it's unsupervised. The difference is you would have had a team of two, four, six, eight developers solely focused on that, and it would have taken them a lot longer than a week. It would have taken them months.
mhm.
And now you've got essentially one systems engineer, very kind of senior software person that's orchestrating and managing many instances of Claude Code to create the final output. And that still takes a week because
Yeah,
there's a lot of back and forth and iteration, but the speed is another level in terms of what we would have thought was possible just a year or two ago.
yeah. The code itself is cheap now, isn't it? That's not where the value is. The value is in the people that are orchestrating the building and the agent.
To produce the code is cheap. I mean, it's yes. I mean,
Relatively.
even if relatively, but I mean, there's so many cost savings. Even if you think about standard, like the old, the normal process of, okay, I'm a developer, I've got a problem, I've figured out how I'm going to solve the problem, I know roughly what I'm going to do now. I've got some existing code here I can pull from. I need to write this bit from new. I'm going to go off and download this library from the internet. I need to read the manual on this thing because I'm not quite sure how it works. But once I do, it'll probably only take me a day to wire it up. A day
Mhm,
to wire it up. So
mhm.
the agents don't have any of those constraints. They know everything largely already, or they can go off and find it out very quickly, and they can generate the thing in minutes. This is entirely transformational.
Yeah, I mean, interesting example. Whenever one of these new tools comes across my radar, I like to have a little play. I, I'm not particularly engineering anymore, but I know enough to break things, and so I'm kind of the target audience, or at least the people that are delving into a lot of these, particularly vibe coding tools, because you can get places quite quickly. So I'm just interested in how they all work, and I've got this, you know, how everyone used to build a Hello World, and then Hello World became the to-do list, you know, but the sort of demo app was this very simple thing. Well, my demo app is the simple CRM in this current world, right? So
Mhm.
when I pick up, I pick up a new tool now, and I did this with Anti-Gravity just after Christmas. I basically one shot I did. I said, I'd like you to build a CRM with contacts, companies, a pipeline, and tasks. Go. And it ran off for 25, 30 minutes. And then it said, sorry, you've run out of your credits. Because it comes with, Google, basically, they're trying to corner the market. So they've given a whole bunch of free credits away, you know, so you can choose your model and you don't pay. And I ran out of credits. And the reason I ran out of credits was the first trap I fell into. The reason I fell into it was because it just created one single file to do the whole thing. That was the entire code base. And every time the agent did something, it resubmitted the entire code base into the context window and just obliterated the credits. And so it was building this thing. Some of it worked, some of it ran out of credits. And then, so I kind of got over that problem and I sort of separated it out. I said, okay, we're just going to focus on the front end and the back end. Again, a leap I was able to make because I know something about something. Um, and so I did that. And then it kind of got into that standard vibe coding agenty type world where, it fixes the problem and then breaks the problem, then fixes the problem again, and then breaks the problem again. You go round and round this loop. And again, I used up my daily credits, just go around and around this loop. So I scrapped that and I looked at the fact that this is supposed to be an agent platform. And that's where it kind of blew my mind because what you can do is set up a web of these agents that are all doing their own different thing. And I had one that was like focused on the data strategy of the piece, one that was focused on the front end, one that was focused on the design, one that was writing the spec, one that was doing the testing, one that was doing the back end. And they were all running simultaneously with markdown files behind them telling them the structure of the code that you wanted to do. So put it in this kind of classes, using VM, all that kind of stuff. So what framework you were using. Uh, and it created an actual meaningful software project and went off and did it. And there were all these agents talking to each other. And at the end of it, after about 35 minutes, I had a working system with a pipeline and a design that was branded and, all this kind of stuff. I guess my point of that is that your average person who has no software engineering experience at all would not have known that that was the way you had to orchestrate those tools to get something meaningful out of it. Now, if you turn that up a dial to kind of an enterprise level platform, up several dials, you can see how that, yes, these things are going to accelerate production. Yes, these things are going to improve the pace. Yes, they may lower some costs. They're certainly going to lower the cost to try things out and the cost to get things to market. But you still need that expert knowledge. You still need that understanding of how good software works, at least for now, to really see the benefits of these tools and these platforms. So the idea that an amateur can come and take away the software engineer's role, I think, is dead at this point. It was a dream that was percolating maybe 12 months ago, but I think it's probably dead at this point. And I would even say that probably the idea that the traditional engineers are just going to be spending their lives fixing vibe coded products is probably dead as well. Because I think the reality is the world in which software engineering happens now is actually what's really changing the fastest. So the way that software is being built, the way it's being constructed, the way it's being released, the way it's being architected, all that kind of stuff, is what's changing much, much quicker than even the AI capabilities within your products, within your services, within your the output that you're driving as a company. So the idea that a manual a manual engineer is going to be fixing some AI built code and that's going to be their role, I think is also a bit of a fallacy. Really, that's just not the way it's going to. That's not the way
I
it's going to
think
go.
I think we're in a transitional phase at the moment. I think ultimately you're probably right. At the moment we're not quite there, but it's how you manage the change is the big thing. As the orchestrator, go back to your architect
Mhm,
analogy. There's only so many robots he can look after at once,
mhm,
and he can probably only build one house at once. Like you probably can't orchestrate the production of 5 houses at once and 5 armies of robots. So there is a limit to uh, what the human orchestrator can orchestrate and keep tabs on and mold, like a piece of clay. And that's the bottleneck to the scale. It's that domain expert. You need a domain expert, and they've got a limit.
Hmm.
So I think at the moment, you a lot of the focus for the industry is on how you provide the good inputs, how you do the design and the specification up front, how you work with an LLM to do really, really good planning, how you get really good documentation at the end, how you get really, how you get tests that will actually validate and verify that the thing works, so that you can put these constraints around the system such that it generates good code in a way that a human can still unpick and still maintain oversight of. So we're doing a lot of work in that area at the moment, and I think it's moving quite fast. And I think last year nobody really knew what this. We were trying to between worlds, and we were trying to kind of
Mm.
retrofit these processes, and we didn't really have a strong steer on how it was going. I think that's changing this year. It does. There's a sense that this stuff's starting to mature now. It's the first time I've ever really had this sense. The
Mhm.
first time I felt like, okay, I think I understand where this is going to land now. I think we can make some big bets that are much safer. And so last year, we said, you know, you should certainly be playing with this stuff. You should certainly be like prototyping with this stuff. I think that conversation is going to change this year. I think if you haven't done that yet, you really, really should.
Mm.
But I think this year we're going to see some of it being used in anger.
Yeah. I think from conversations I'm having, there's still organizations out there that are not engaging with this at all, that they're seeing the opportunity as the ability to add an AI feature, an AI function to their product or to their service. But I don't see, I don't think that's where the opportunity is in the immediate term.
I know, but it's no different to any wave of technology. It's exactly the same with cloud, right? 5 years ago, probably maybe longer than that, 10 years ago, um, there were businesses that were like, "Yeah, but I don't see why I need to move off-prem." Actually, the
Mm.
whole thing's a circular conversation now, isn't it? But um, back then, all it meant is they moved later, and but eventually they moved. So it's when are you comfortable to make the bet? When are you comfortable that actually we've landed somewhere now, and we're on a maturity curve rather than an innovation curve.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think, something you mentioned there made me think of this, but we're going to see a resurgence of waterfall. If in the, waterfall was the legacy, and then we had agile, and then there was, various versions of that, and, various versions of gated agile, structured agile, that kind of stuff. But is waterfall back?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think that it it makes a lot more. So specification was really expensive, um, and it's got cheaper. What we're seeing now actually is the documentation and the specification that we're doing on projects today with AI is of a better, higher quality than we've ever been able to produce with humans, because humans take a long time to produce documentation and AI can do it instantly. And actually, you can iterate on that really, really quickly and get some fantastic results. And you can also throw away something and rebuild it entirely from scratch. It doesn't cost you anything. So, so I think the specification to drive these AI tools becomes really, really important. And so, a kind of waterfall is coming back, I think. I'm pausing here because actually the way you work on it is iterative, and you are iteratively updating the spec. So in that regards, it has got some similarity with agile. But where I would say agile has got to die or change completely, if it's to survive in any form, is to revisit this concept of the ceremonies and the story points, because these are just, they don't make sense in a machine driven world where the machine is doing most of the code. If you think about what you're going to spend a day or half a day doing a sprint planning meeting every couple of weeks, that makes, with a whole team of developers, that makes no sense in this new world. If you're trying to split up your tasks into human manageable sections, then you're making your tasks too small to benefit from any of the automation. It might take you 3 days to create this task. It's going to take a a machine, once it knows what it's got to do, it's going to take it about 10 seconds. So
Yeah.
that whole process is as far as I believe, that whole process is dead.
Yeah. As you say, it's still obviously iterative because someone needs to look after these bots, but the cycles are going to be measured in hours and days rather than weeks and months, aren't they? So it's going to be the way that's approached is going to be completely different. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's interested in this, look at spec-driven development, OpenSpec, uh, old school kind of BDD and feature files. I think that's the direction we're heading in. You're expanding the unit of work. So it's no longer this; it's now this.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So we've talked about Anthropic. We've mentioned them. There's a couple of other big players doing interesting things. So Google is eating the world. They've won AI. Have they won AI? I don't know. Gemini 3 seems to be the talk of the town. That's the number one model that everyone's loving at the moment, isn't it? Gemini 3 doing all sorts of interesting stuff.
I
And they
don't.
obviously
I think it
released.
depends, though. I think it depends. I wouldn't say that, Rob. I think it depends.
I
I
don't
think if
know.
you're what we've found is that the model selection matters. So our teams are based on the particular task they're carrying out. They have identified that this model performs really well, and they will use that model for planning. Versus this model for coding is much
Mm,
better. Versus this model for doing front end work, so user interface work is much better. So we are actually using 3 different models by 3 different providers regularly, depending on the type of work that we're doing. So at the moment, Claude Code and Opus 4.5 is the winner. Is one in terms of software development. That will change. I'm sure it will change probably next week. Um, but Gemini is really good at certain things. So why? So how is Gemini one for you?
I think just because they're very good at marketing. They're just everywhere at the moment. A lot of stuff I've been seeing. I said Gemini 3 is the best multi-purpose model, certainly.
Mm.
But this multi-model approach seems to be rising to the fore, as you say. You might use Gemini 3 to kind of do your front end and maybe help write your specs, and then you use Claude to kind of then get into certain types of code or whatever. But they're all playing off each other, and again, that's kind of where the agents and the agent skills and their definition files, that kind of stuff. If you're doing this, use this. If you're doing that, use that. And how they interact and check each other's homework is quite an interesting dynamic. And I think that
Yeah,
whole space is evolving. Yeah, that
that's a
whole
really
space.
interesting point, though, because there are actually quite a lot of systems being produced now where they depend on the models being different.
Hmm.
And so I think that they're looking at this in education where, can you get models to mark coursework and exams? And the answer is yes, you can. But to get them to do it to a level of confidence, you need the models to check each other. And when they start talking to each other and checking the way that they graded it, it's almost like a moderation board. They end up much more aligned, and you end up with much lower kind of margins of error. I guess the model providers themselves would love you just to be using one model. But actually, in this AI world, the benefit of having multiple providers with different ways that they train the models, different things that they specialize on, is actually additive.
Yeah. 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 So obviously, yeah. So Gemini 3's had a lot of buzz. They've released, Google have come out with UCP, the Universal Commerce Protocol, to rival or stand alongside the OpenAI equivalent, which came out last year. ACP, we've talked a bit about anti-gravity and their agent platform. Obviously, the big news, which we leaked 6-9
Do we?
months ago, when obviously I was on the hotline to Tim Cook, and he said to me, we're ditching ChatGPT, which is ditching OpenAI. It's going to be Google running the AI for Siri behind the scenes. We talked about it on
Um,
here. Actually, that's now big news. That's now official. That's happening. So that says lots of interesting things about Apple and where they're at. But Google, if that's true, and it sticks longer than the OpenAI relationship did, it's huge for them because they'll own the entire mobile device ecosystem. Obviously, they run Gemini is the AI for their own phones, as soon as it's on iOS as well, an Apple ecosystem. That's a huge thing. So they just seem to be everywhere. And we talked about Google and they're owning the full stack, and the only company that can do that because they make their own chips and they've got their own power plants and blah. It's very difficult to see anyone getting past them, isn't it? I mean, Google's won.
I mean, yeah, it's just not what I'm saying. So I think they have a very capable model. Gemini 3 is very good. It's good at doing lots of different things, and that's really its strength. It's got some understanding or some kind of world model in there as well, where it can figure out what's going on inside videos and that kind of thing. So, but a week's a long time in this new world, and if you there are all kind of charts out there where you can see which model was flavor of the month, and they swap places all the time. So I would expect they will keep their crown for a bit, and then I expect they won't, and somebody else will be flavor of the month. So I don't know in which sense that they've won. I see OpenAI pushing into loads of different product areas. They are focused on figuring out how to monetize this thing at the moment, I think. And then you've got Anthropic, obviously, still trying to pioneer what it even means to have an AI or a human entity working alongside you, and kind of really taking ownership of the software space. But now they're trying to push into kind of the mainstream with co-work. And then you got Google, and that's just on every Android phone already. So you know
Mm.
people are people should be using Gemini in their day-to-day lives a lot, I suppose. And they're doing lots of cool stuff in on the fringes as well with anti-gravity. I don't think there's a clear winner. I don't expect there will ever be a winner. I think there will be somewhere between 2 and 3 winners, and we talk regularly about those 3. Um, yeah, again, it's no different to mobile. It's no different to cloud. We say this all the time, but it's true. There's always a pool of these.
Yeah. So as a self-declared Apple fanboy, what's your feeling on the Google versus Siri conversation?
I think they had to do it. I think it feels like they've admitted defeat. I'm surprised that they went with Google. Apparently, OpenAI said no. They weren't prepared to meet Apple's terms. So yeah, I mean, it's still it's still Apple, so they still want tight control, tight integration. It's not the same model that everybody else is getting. It's a special custom model. It'll be sitting in a different physical place. It'll have different privacy kind of setup. Um, but am I pleased that something is happening? Yes, because goodness me, Siri is bad. And I know, I'm fed up of having to wait now. Like it can't even do the simplest things. And when the iPhone is your primary device and you're using it to run your day or play your music and sort your calendars out and all that kind of stuff, and it's as useless as it is, then yes, I'm excited they've done something.
Is it another sign of the sort of the maturation of the space? I wondered. Like Apple have just decided, look, we don't do this. We do software, we build software, we do some hardware, and I know Apple's always been famous for owning the whole ecosystem. But is this just Apple basically saying, look, we're grown ups here. We're not gonna run our own models. That's someone else's.
So I would say let's look at history, and that would say that this is what they do. They partner with somebody until they can figure out how to do it themselves, and then they ditch them. That's what they did with Intel on the chips. Now they've got their Apple Silicon, um, and that's they're not giving up on AI. They're developing chips that run AI really well. They are developing their own models, and they've done some really fantastic research in this space. Actually, they have some of the best small models for doing stuff like video transcription.
Mm.
They can do that really fast and really cheaply.
Which makes sense.
Um,
They're going to want to put those on device, aren't they? That's the kind
mm,
of premise.
yeah, so I wonder if they're just taking a slightly different approach where everybody else is focusing on getting the models as big as possible in the cloud and layering on more and more features to make them more and more sticky. It wouldn't surprise me if Apple just go, right, okay, we need a general purpose AI. We can't let Siri languish anymore. Let's do this thing with Google, and then they double down on their original approach, and they just wait it out. So they wait until the hardware's there, and they wait until you can do more of it locally, and it makes sense, and they just keep focusing on that user experience, um, and a couple of years from now, they'll turn around and and it'll be different. But That's where I would probably place a bet based on what's happened, well, what they've done before, but nobody knows really, do they?
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned obviously the ongoing attempts by OpenAI to monetize their offer. We've seen the
Mm,
arrival of ads. Finally, it's the biggest, worst kept secret in the universe. I mean, how do they walk this tightrope? So, I mean, if you haven't seen it, there's now a free version and a very low cost version called ChatGPT Go, I think,
that's right.
um,
Yeah,
which is at $8 instead of $20. Both of those two versions have varying degrees of functionality and access to the latest models, but they crucially are ad supported. How, and we've talked about this before with trust, and lots of the CEOs are coming out of all these companies trying to do podcasts, trying to be doing media, trying to put themselves up as people of integrity, and you can trust us. We've talked about how that's probably around, just that the level of access and intimacy that these chat tools, these AI tools have with all of our lives because they just know everything about us. So there's the deep level of trust that's going to be required if we're going to engage with these products in the long term. Surely putting ads on the platform just erodes that, right? How can we trust their answers if they're ad supported? I don't. That's a really difficult tightrope to walk.
they're saying the same thing Google said when they released ads in their Google homepage for the first time,
Mm,
which is, it won't erode the experience. We're not allowing them to influence the search results you get back. And that was Google's line. And obviously, the first 10 things
yeah,
that come back are all sponsored. It took a while to get there, but that's where we are today. OpenAI are saying the same thing. Time will tell, I suppose. The influence thing won't happen straight away, but again, looking at history tells you it kind of will. Yes, it's a real issue, but I think that's, at least you have an option, don't you? At the moment, you can pay for it, and you don't get the ads. That seems, whether it's your TV streaming subscription, or your AI, or some other piece of SaaS. That does seem to be the model that the whole world's kind of landed on at the moment. You can have a free version with ads, or you can pay us. And everybody's got to make their money, haven't they? And
yeah,
OpenAI have got to make a lot of money because they're burning a lot of it.
yeah. Oh, we'll have to wait and see what their first piece of hardware is going to be when that finally drops. But I guess it says that they're just not that confident that they're going to make enough money out of their products and their services. They're just going to have to go down the ad route like everyone else.
I mean, I just think that was always the plan. It's got to have
Right.
been always the plan. I don't know. I don't understand. Everyone needs to understand how to monetize this.
Mm,
Um, and OpenAI do seem to be in the worst position because they've ended up with the least sustainable business on paper. That's what it looks like, anyway.
yeah. Yeah. They got to find their money from somewhere.
Mm.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, there you go. Lots has happened since the end of 2025. What's your predictions for 2026? Let's round off. It's January. I put you on the spot. We've got to look forward. Where are we going to be in 12 months' time?
That's who knows? I don't know where we're going to be next week. I think when I when I was talking about the changes in software development at the beginning of last year, I was apparently very controversial and I got a lot of hate. uh, this year, I think the whole software industry uh, will align on a new way of being, a new software development lifecycle. I don't think they'll have all adopted it by that point. I think we're at the stage now where the software companies will start adopting it, and they'll start adopting something that's standardized and that makes sense, and that whole industry is gonna change. I think that we will start seeing the equivalents of what we experienced over the last 2 years, but hitting other industries for the first real time this year. So I would say legal and finance, you're next. And you're going to have your own version of Claude code blowing your mind. And by the end of this year, you'll be thinking about how do we reinvent our businesses for 2027. Um, I think the models will get bigger and better. Um, I really hope that the token cost continues to plummet because we are going to be spending more and more and more on those tokens. So yeah, I hope that they come down. In fact, I'm sure they will come down. I think we'll get new breakthroughs in two new breakthroughs. Okay, here you go. Here you go. There'll be some new chips, and they will do stuff at ridiculous scales of speed, much faster than we have today. So that is actually the thing that's going to bring the token cost down. And they'll start to release new large language models that have a more complicated internal structure that mirrors our human brains more closely. You know, where there's maybe a part of it that can just recall facts, like a 4-year-old or a 10-year-old can just spit out facts. They don't have to think about that all the time. And then there's a part of the main part which will do all the thinking and all the reasoning. I think I'll
Interesting. So
stop there. I'll stop there.
stop there. Yeah, no, it sounds good. I don't disagree. I think there's really an interesting, maybe emerging trend around this kind of segmentation of capability. So we saw OpenAI release ChatGPT Health, for example. Google followed up with something very similar about 2 weeks later. Um, and I think that chimes, I think, with your thoughts on legal and finance, is that I can see a world where you end up with these very specific services, boxes, which play into some of these industries which have very high revenue that's pushed through them. The US companies are focused on healthcare. It's a slightly different setup for us in the UK, but you can see there are very specific markets that you think, yeah, if one of these guys can get a foothold here with their particular flavor of AI system, you can really see them being
Um,
put. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a GPT health, GPT legal, GPT finance, and they sold them as individual products.
I'm less sure about how it's all going to play out in the commerce world, which is, you know, you did touch on it earlier. There are loads of developments around commerce, and actually that's another way ChatGPT, not OpenAI, are going to make their money, isn't it? They've just said they're going to take 4% on
4%.
any transaction. Um, but we still haven't seen compelling mainstream buying journeys in, you know, involving our chatbots. And then there's a thought that this is all going to go mainstream and that's how we're going to do it. But I haven't seen that yet, and I'm going to be watching that really closely. I want to understand, because that's a big habitual change for people, and it's predicated on people spending a lot of time in their chat windows as opposed to the browser, and I don't know how that's going to work out. So I'm interested in that.
Yeah, agentic commerce is going to be fascinating. I think that's going to be a big thing this year. I think we'll see lots of demos. We'll see lots of proofs of concept, lots of shiny little toys to play with. It will take some time before it becomes the main. I think, again, same way we saw with mobile. Mobile commerce wasn't a thing; it was a toy, and then it was all of a sudden it was everything. I suspect
Mm.
that the same trajectory, and this is the year where we'll see lots of experiments. We'll see what organizations will try different things to kind of get the consumer into that way of thinking. Because once we go that way, there's no way back, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Good stuff. Well, I think that's the pod.